Lovely. Well, welcome to the first Tread session of 2024. And it gives me great pleasure to announce our guest today. So releasing his first EP on Hessle Audio in 2016, Ploy went on to release on Timedance, Hemlock and Lies Records. 8 years since his debut, most people who've been on a UK dance floor have probably been exposed to his strain of bizarro, industrial and hard-hitting club cuts. And yeah, I'm sure that for most people here, you won't need much more of an introduction, but just to kind of give you an idea of how tonight's going to run, we're going to talk slightly generally just about kind of how... Well, I guess kind of how things have gone so far, what Ploy's creative process looks like, and then we're going to get straight into a track breakdown from your new Timedance EP. So without further ado, please give it up for Ploy. Hello.
Hi.
How's it going?
Yeah, good, thanks. I don't think the mic's on.
No, neither do I.
Hello?
Hey.
Mic check, 1, 2.
Is mine?
Yeah, that's better. There it is, yeah.
Is it on? No, mine's on.
Yours is...
Is it? It's not.
I think it is. Yeah, there you go.
I thought he sounded louder than me.
I think mine's slightly louder, yeah.
Well, that's not fair. Thank you so much for being here with us.
That's okay.
This is a bit of a homecoming for you, isn't it? You got here slightly earlier to see some friends. Would you say Bristol is your kind of the home of your sound?
Definitely spent a bit of time here. I grew up not far from here. My mum lives maybe 30 minutes away. So Bristol was a kind of closest big city. Yeah, and I lived here for a while with friends, but then moved to London about 7 years ago. So I come back a little bit, but not loads. So yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's nice. I actually missed a train, so I didn't get here as early as I wanted to. But I'll hang around tomorrow, definitely.
And so I guess, so you studied at Bath Spa, right? You did music production.
Yep, creative music tech.
When was the kind of moment where things clicked for you and you were like, okay, this is something I'm going to pursue?
I think it was probably before then. Like, if I look back on my life, the kind of thread that runs through everything is just like mainly just listening to music, to be honest, and not having really an interest in anything else for a long time. But then I kind of like decided to pursue it in education. I think I was 18. I did A-levels, but didn't want to do anything with those. Didn't want to go to university with those. So like I took 2 years back, went to college, did a music tech course, and tried to do that, and then just spent the next 2 years trying to write music, basically, and like overcome a lot of hurdles with that. And then that came out quite well. So I did a degree in that. But to be honest, it wasn't like something financially that I ever thought about pursuing in that respect. When I joined the course, the degree course, they said, don't do this if you want to earn money. Do this because you want to pursue like a creative passion or something like that. And learn more, essentially just educate yourself more and like broaden your horizons to it a little bit, but not for a career, definitely. But and I still don't really think it is a career, personally. Like, making music isn't a career. It's not lucrative. And, unless you're like in a very odd minority of people where they do make money from their music. But if you're making something that's kind of like a bit niche, then you don't make any money from releasing music or selling it, really. You have to make your income from DJing. But so yeah, I don't really know actually how to answer that. I think it just like evolved a little bit over time, but if I wasn't so like tunnel vision about just wanting to do it anyway, I don't know. There wasn't a point where I thought I can make money from this, basically. It just started to happen a little bit. Yeah.
And if it were up to you, you'd make money from it solely from production?
Not anymore, actually, because you realise that DJing is a whole different thing in itself, which you have to learn and like develop that, and that's really interesting. But it's completely separate from, well, not completely separate. It all ties in, but it's a very separate entity from making music. I don't know. I feel like if all my if you had just income based on writing music, it would throw up a load of problems in itself. But it'd be nice to get paid more for that, definitely. It'd be, yeah.
Thank you. I want to make ample time for the track breakdown, so I think we should get into it. So you're going to be breaking down finally. So this is on your July EP.
Yes.
Called...
For When We Haven't Slept.
Yes.
Yeah.
You actually promoted the EP with a photo of you, Batu, and Louis Thrill. Which one's the label manager there?
Louis, he got in touch like a couple months before. He was just like a big fan of the early Timedance stuff, and he kind of wanted to speak to us a little bit. No, not at all. Obviously, we met him in a car park in I don't know, somewhere weird. Whereas outside of Cambridge or something, I think he was following Pete Doherty around, and we bumped into him. Pete Doherty was in the same hotel, which was it was like a budget hotel, I think. So it was quite funny, but. For the festival, he was doing a secret garden party, and we asked for a picture.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. I guess the EP itself, and specifically this track, is quite a different vibe from other material that you're known for, other material kind of releases on Timedance and Hessle. How did it come about? It's obviously a more kind of like euphoric, kind of like, dance for tune, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely is a little bit more like that. I think I was at a point where, I don't know, I'd done a lot of like weirder, kind of darker stuff. I did that album, which was like a bit of a slog to kind of write, to be honest. And I was in a bit of a different place and just kind of wanted to have more fun in the studio a little bit.
Why was it a slog?
Hard to say, really. I don't really like being like commissioned to do something. I find quite difficult, actually. I like left to my own devices, I can probably just write loads of music, but being asked to do something that feels quite specific, I found a lot more of a challenge. And I think I might not have been in the right headspace to do that kind of thing anyway, especially for a label which I knew what the kind of sound they wanted. So it just took a little bit longer, and it felt a little bit more work went into it. But the Timedance thing, I think it was just a combination of just wanting to write things a little bit different to how I was before. And then the label being in a place where I think Omar just wanted to kind of like sort of push into some different areas a little bit and kind of commission slightly different things.
Are you consciously kind of referencing that scene and that time and that sample, or is it literally just like a melodic element?
a lot of the time it's just another element of the track. This one, I haven't actually chosen it for like the fact that it's an interesting sample, because it's more of the like, it's probably one of the most kind of direct, obvious kind of choices of sample, but it's more how I chose it because there's ways to get loads out of that one sample that like make your life a lot easier when it comes to arrangement and structure. It's like getting the most out of your source material, basically. So I thought this was a good example, which I'll show in a bit. But on the whole, no, I kind of like don't want to put like a time stamp on a record, because then it has less longevity, I think. There is obviously like some tracks that just do that accidentally, and they just reference a time and a sound in whatever was happening in dance music at that point, which can be really good. But on the whole, I'm trying to make stuff that might be played for a bit longer, which actually, yeah, I feel like I'm not quite achieving fully all the time. But yeah, this one, it was just like another element. And yeah, I listen to a lot of R&B anyway, a lot of singers and a lot of vocalists and that kind of thing. When I listen to it, you can always hear, I'm always trying to hear if there's something that I can take, essentially, like whenever I listen to anything.
So that's what it is that attracts you to samples so much. It's basically because it allows you to have like a melodic springboard without actually having to write the melody.
For vocals, 100%, yeah. Yeah. But you could, then the process of like refining it, you strip that away, and sometimes it's like there's nothing of it left anyway. But it's just helped you get from one stage to another without having to know anything about writing music.
Awesome. And I've heard you talk before in interviews about kind of having this very like human quality in your music, which is something that really stands out to me. I guess apart from the samples, how do you achieve that?
Yeah, I guess it's a source sounds really. Like the most obvious one is obviously using a vocal in a track is going to make it more human, and then kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You can broadens who can what is the word? It makes it more engaging for other people because there is that human element. It's less kind of intense and weird. But you can use that with like any kind of percussion also that sounds more natural. But then it's about the balance really, and depends what you want to do creatively. But I like to have like a balance of both in there.
Wicked. I think let's get into it. So this isn't the Logic project. This is your stems kind of like, so each track is like a stem,
yeah,
right?
This is almost like all pre-final mix as well. Because the way, I don't have a project file for one project that is comprehensive everything in there, because I might have like 50 different project files and I'm always saving a new one and making a new one and then kind of like scrapping a lot of stuff and then refining it.
This is something we will talk about later.
Yeah, we can get into that definitely.
Yeah, wicked. So I guess, can you just take us through the sample and how you processed it, if that was kind of the first thing?
Absolutely. It was, why is it doing this? Yeah, that was the first thing. So it is R&B singer Summer Walker, from her, it was a Tiny Desk concert. So what I will do, is that the right one?
Is that just the...
I feel like it's being a bit slow maybe because of the recording. There we go. Right, yeah. What I'll do with anything really is I'll drag it into the sampler, and then that's usually a good way to start a track, or just if I hear something and see if you can get something out of it. I then start to loop it up.
This is not Summer Walker, is it?
Yeah, just very pitched up there. This process does often take a long time, but I have actually done this one before, so shouldn't take this long.
Just while you're looking at it, and this isn't me trying to get you in trouble, but just because it's something that might be valuable for people who are thinking about finding samples. How does it work? How does it work with things like licensing, or is that just...
That is not something that I've ever...
Let's not talk about that.
But also it's like, I don't know, you sell 300 records? I mean, there's just no way that's going to get on anyone's radar. Mm-hmm. If you look at
So that is the beauty of underground dance music.
Yeah, you don't make any money, but
fine.
You don't get sued, I suppose. But I tell you what, because I thought that might take a little while, I actually just did it earlier, I think. Let's have a look. Or did I? Nope. No, I didn't. Right.
Make me feel better. I finally got you on my bed. You on my bed, but I finally got you on my bed, but I still finally got you on my bed, but I finally got you on my bed, finally got you on my.
So is this just like a Logic sampler?
This is a Logic basic sampler. I don't know why the sound is cut out. All right, there we go. This is... Anyway, you get the gist. It's like, you start to loop something up and then you can hear something that might work. That was like a 10-minute audio. So once you've got that, so then you put a kick drum underneath it and you start to get it in time and process it, and then you can bounce it down, stretch it out a little bit, and that's usually how that starts with that process.
Do you use any plugins to process the samples?
At this stage, not too many. You might put a filter on it to kind of like get something, put some movement in it, but then the main part is then kind of looping that up. So you've got like a 16-bar sample, and that's going to be like the crux. If you think that's going to be the focal point, then that and a kick drum is what you have to be able to listen to for a little while. So as long as you have that and that's interesting and you can keep that interesting, then you're kind of, that you're onto something that is good there. But then what is really good is then starting to duplicate that track and then start to process it in different ways, which I did here.
Finally got you on my bed.
So there was that. Then you start to duplicate that channel up. You start chopping it up a little bit, and then that just acts as more source material that you can then refer back to later in the arrangement process. Just put a filter on it, and it changes the dynamics a lot, and it's now not just the same thing anymore. Tidy it up a little bit. So you got that, and then maybe you've got like another 16 bars of material there that you're going to be able to use to kind of introduce that original focal point into your track at some point. So it's like if you're doing all this in the loop stage, which is what I usually do, you should have like, layers and layers of different material that will all come from the same source point. So that's going to give coherence throughout the whole thing. And also when it comes to like getting out of that loop, you've got all this stuff ready to go that it's going to be a lot easier for you to start putting your track together without it sounding boring, essentially.
That's really cool. So it's using a sample not only as a melodic element, but also basically as like a percussive tool, essentially.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about getting the most out of it as possible. But then I will take that original sample and then I'll start to write the melody around that. But then if you look here, so we got like in the final, so we got the chops, and then you can layer that up with some of the original. So there's already 3 channels of things going on there that all come from that one sample source. And you work with the pitch a little bit. So it's just, it's getting the most out of whatever you're working with. But I mean, the original thing that you use, whether that's a riff or a sample or a percussion loop, that has to stand alone as itself. And that's why I kind of like just work with a kick drum and one other thing for a long time. And then you can strip that back throughout the track as well. And you know it's still going to sound effective.
Cool. Let's move on to the kick drum, I think, or the drums in general.
Yeah, this one it's kind of quite simple, but I use the same process for making kick drums every time. You want to layer kick drums up a lot and, apply that to all drums. And I kind of do that every time and then bounce it down into a new audio file so you can refer back to it. But kick drums is also a good way to kind of add personality into music as well. So usually take at least two samples for a kick.
Do you have any like go-to sample packs?
To be honest, I've been collecting them for like nearly 10 years now, that I've just got like a whole library of things. I think, which is really good actually, and I think that's like quite important in the process. I think nowadays splice is kind of like the main one, but if you're all kind of using the same kind of source material, then you're not gonna, you need your stuff to kind of like sound a little bit different. So sourcing older sample packs is really good, or like on old scratch records, there's loads of samples and loops in that. So there's ways of finding this stuff, so it gives yourself a little bit more of like a personality essentially.
Just before you go into the kick drums, you've mentioned it a couple of times now, so I wonder if now's a good time to talk about it. So you kind of have been, the reason we're seeing the project like this is because you don't work on like one project file, but you kind of like work incrementally and like save them each time.
Yeah.
If we can go into more detail later, but I think
for that reason, but also then it starts to force you to commit to an idea that you might then in the future might think twice about and want to go and fiddle with and change. But it kind of speeds your workflow up a little bit more if you're constantly bouncing and then committing to one separate sound and then bringing that back in. You get results a lot quicker, I think, and it's a lot better. However, if you're constantly saving new projects, so you can always go and refer back to that. But then you can take that new project and then you're going to want to refine it down a lot and delete channels and then free up workspace, basically. So that's just the way I've worked for a long time, until the point where, I would always bounce stuff down in the mix down stage anyway. So I personally just want to end up with maybe 20 stems which make up your track that you've consolidated along the way. Makes your life a lot easier when you're going to mix that down.
Yeah, that seems like a really good workaround, because I guess like having some kind of like raw material to work off is good and a lot less daunting than just like having a blank slate, but also a lot more efficient than just like screwing things up and starting again. It's almost like sampling your own like previous work,
Absolutely, and it like adds to personality and character to the music, which is kind of what you will miss if you're just referencing the same sample pack as a lot of other people, for example, which it can sound technically really good, but if you want something to be distinctive, then you've got to kind of think about how you're going to achieve that, really. And I feel like, layering up your drums is one quite easy way of doing that, and it not only helps you mix down, because, if you've layered up your kick drum where you've just, so we've got here, separate it into like a top end kick. You might like the character of the sound of the top end of that. You want to EQ that and take out a lot of the bottom, around 300, 400 hertz. Layer that with a kick drum that's got a lot of low end, a lot more boom to it. And then do the opposite with that and roll off the top end of that so it leaves room in your mix for the other kick. And then you can, but you can be really creative with it and put whatever sound you want on top of there to make your kick stand out. And if you, you could just take like something industrial like this. If I was making a track that was more, like for the Lies record or something, you want it to be a bit darker and a bit weirder source material, you can start to layer that kind of stuff on there. Probably just want like a real short attack. Suddenly it gives it a bit more beef. And then send those to a bus and then just a little bit of compression to like mold them together. And you've got like a fuller kick drum. So in the mixdown process, you're not going to have to worry too much about trying to bring the low end out of that or like beef it up too much with compression because you've already done that at the very start and you can bounce that out and then it's just going to make your life a lot easier.
Right, so it's kind of about like mixing down as you go along, save your progress kind of like, and then just... Yeah,
100, well that's how I've always done it essentially. And then there's just less to do at the end.
Wicked. What comes next? So you work with the samples and the kick drums kind of like by themselves for a while.
Yeah.
What was next in this tune?
The next thing, probably start to program the rest of the drums.
In fact, should we play the tune
yes.
to begin with?
Yeah.
I realise that's one thing we haven't done.
Have I got it?
Sorry, that came slightly late in the day.
No,
we should have done that at the start.
That first 2.5 minutes, it's just build up really to get to that point where the actual track started out, which is just a sample and the drums. So I was just trying to illustrate how much you can get from that one sample, and if you apply that to everything that you do, then you're gonna get a lot more source material, which is going to be really helpful for the arrangement process.
Yeah, and I'm quite keen to talk about the like sub-bass elements later, so maybe at that point we could hear some of the second section. We're going to move on to talk about like percussive elements in bass, but and there will be like a more fleshed out Q&A at the end, but I didn't know if it was worth kind of throwing it out to you guys now. If there's anything we've spoken about so far that you have a question about, do raise your hands. We have a mic at the front, so you might have to come up. No, you don't even have to come up. You can just sit down. But if anyone has a question, pop your hand up. There, Ishmael.
Yeah, also I don't know what is like super relevant and what is interesting and whether this is like super basic or... So anything, let me know.
Yeah, any feedback.
Hello. Nice. You talked about some of the filtering on the vocal.
Yeah.
But could you go into a bit more detail on it? Because none of my filterings ever sounded like that. So,
really? Okay,
to find out.
I'm a big fan of like flicking through presets. They always like throw up some interesting things. So let's go back to that vocal sample. It's already chopped already, so it's in like one bar phrasing or something. Where was it? Vocal sample. Right. Yeah, so this is a filter freak, is what I've got on that already. So I kind of, this preset was called High Downer, but that is all that is going on there. So it's chopped already, and then it's just like cutting off before it hits the low end. And the resonance turned up, so it's giving it that little spiky Turns it from that to that. And then you can automate that, play around with that. It takes a little while sometimes to go through some things and then find something that actually sounds good, because a lot of the time it might not, and it depends what you're working with. But the Sound Toys things are really good for that, especially the filter frequency. But that's it. There's just one filter on that.
I've got a question. How did you start the track? Could you just show us a bit about, how you started it, what you used, what you found inspiration in?
Yeah, the start is. Do you remember when I tried to show you like the looping thing, but it just sounded really bad? It was.
Don't make him do it again. He's stressed.
That was how I started. I dragged this like 12-minute YouTube thing into there, and I'm just flicking through the audio to find loop points, to find something. So when I was listening to that, I could just hear that there's a lot of open spaces in that original audio, a lot of things that you can kind of pull new rhythms out of. And I'd apply that same thing with drums as well. So that it's like you can time stretch things and pull them about and start to make kind of new grooves out of pre-existing ones. And then you can start to layer that up. I find that always makes for quite an interesting rhythmic ideas. But yeah, that started with that sample, and then going through it and to see what I could loop up. I do have the raw audio somewhere. Yeah, and then I would start to layer that up with the melody, which are these little percussion kind of melodic hits. Which are actually, quite different to what I'd usually use. But I found they kind of fitted. Again, I've layered these up as well. So this bounce is probably actually two of those. One would just be the dry hit. The other one would be an audio with some delay on. It just stretches that sound out for a bit longer. Then layer that up with a slightly different one. And then I've got a third layer going on, which is like almost like a comb filter effect, which then starts to rise at the end. So you've taken one hit that might be like 1 or 2 seconds of sound, and then you can stretch that out for maybe 16 bars. It's just keeps things interesting and evolving. And as long as the crux of your tune, which is usually the drums and the bass, as long as that's listenable and that's kind of strong enough, everything else around it should just kind of almost complement that and kind of keep it moving forward.
For a minute there, I thought someone had a really freaky ringtone. I was like, turn it up. What makes sense to come to next? Would you say it's the percussive elements? I'm keen to talk about the sub bass, but I realise that might come last.
So we can talk. Let's
talk about the sub bass. I'm dying for it. Yeah, I think what's really interesting in this track is that it's like, yeah, the sub bass isn't just kind of like linked to the kick, but it kind of has like its own life and it's very dynamic. But it's not a track that you would necessarily first pick out the sub bass on. Obviously, when you have like a vocal sample, that's kind of the thing that leads it. But yeah, if you could kind of like talk us through how you make it so dynamic and like warm, that would be great.
Yeah, there's two basses in this. I think the key to most things is trying to keep it as simple as possible. And this, we've got one that kind of provides a bit of the melody. And then we've got a second, the big boomy kind of bass. I mean, that's from like a sample pack of drill samples where a lot of these 808s are really overly processed, but they give them some new dynamics. So I kind of refer to that sometimes because it kind of cuts through all the spatial stuff that you have going on in the track. And then quite a simple, just a sine wave melody. It's just a little bit of distortion on there, maybe like a sent to an amp on a bus, but really not a great deal going on there whatsoever. And then you want to sidechain that to your kick drum, which is, as we've just been through, already got all the low end that you need in there. Just this fairly extreme kind of sidechain going on, but just like ducking out by 5 decibels. It just provides that kind of, just provides the movement that you need, really.
Yeah, that's another thing. I mean, maybe at this point we listen to like 30 seconds more of the latter section, because I guess that's really where the sub bass comes in. But the kind of movement of the track and the swing is something that I think is really significant. I guess soon we'll move to talk about arrangement, but yeah, it'd be good to know how you kind of arrange the components. Go ahead, hit it.
Play the rest, yeah.
Ooh, trying to get you out my bed, 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 trying to get you out
Yeah, it is actually quite dark when you listen to it. When you listen to it without the vocal, it's like...
Yeah, if you take the vocal away, it's kind of more in tone with other stuff that I've done, yeah.
Yeah, totally. The bongos.
The bongos, yeah.
I guess, well, what would make sense to talk about? Yeah, would that be the next thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
I saw it was
We've
next
just
on
got,
the stems.
Yeah, we've got a couple of layers of those. Again, kept them quite simple on this. They are delayed. Might have been a little bit of filtering on there as well, but not too much, and a bit of reverb, just kind of like push them back into the background. So the stuff like that kind of percussion, you want all of that kind of moving around in the space outside of where the main stuff is lying, really. And then that adds to the swing, because there's no swing on anything like the clap or the kick or anything. That's all very straight, but everything else kind of needs to float around it in order to give it that movement. That's the key, really, with that kind of stuff.
Cool. Let's talk about arrangement more generally then. How do you approach it?
I'll be in a 8-bar or 16-bar loop with the main ideas for a long time, and then working in that. As long as you can listen to that on repeat for a long time, then you know, like I said, you know you're onto something that's going to be quite useful. Then I'm going to duplicate the channels a lot and start running them through different things like the filtering or some delay or some kind of effects or some plugins to like generate a bit more source sounds. As long as it's all coming from the same place, and that's all going to work together at the end. I did make some notes actually. Then once it's kind of a bit more like a canvas, the way that I used the DAW, and it is Logic, which is, it's not like the most intuitive or easy to get on board with kind of thing for creating. It's more like a audio processing piece of software, really. So I think.
What made you choose Logic in the first place? Has it always been Logic?
Yeah, when I went to college, Ableton wasn't really, I think it like started getting used a lot more in maybe on my second year of college or something like that, but they taught Logic. So I had to learn that. But it took me about 2 years to kind of learn how to write music on Logic, and I nearly gave up a couple of times. It was like, yeah, it was not that fun, to be honest. It's not a fun process making music on Logic, really, at that time.
You're really selling. You don't make any money, and it's not even fun.
It's not always enjoyable, actually. No, but now I get loads out of it because I kind of like throw loads of ideas at the canvas, essentially, and then start refining it after that. I find that's the best way to use it, but I don't know how you know, if that's the most popular way to use it, to be honest. But then, so I've got all the ideas there, and I'll start to refine it and start stripping things back and just work with the main ideas. And then start to get some kind of very basic arrangement in place, kind of like very basic structure. If you want to get something quickly, it's like 32 bars for an intro, maybe then 64 bars of like the bulk of the material, and then, you know, you start to roll it out from there. Once you've got that down, you can just start to chip away at that process and start refining it even more. And then I'm talking about the bouncing of stems every time. You can start working in stages, and then when you want to get to the sound design part, it's a lot easier if you're working in audio to then start adding little sound design ideas in there. It's a lot less messy as well if you're doing that in the audio stage.
Actually, I'm quite keen to talk about when it comes to composition and arrangement. This tune is perhaps not the best example, but your Death Test EP, what I find so interesting is that in a similar way to this one, the first kind of half of the track is like this really like big, like evocative rattling build-up, which actually leads to like the most kind of like empty part of the track. So it's almost like an anti build-up in the sense that you don't have the kick drum and the bass come in like you'd expect, but it's still like so impactful and dance floor. And then that's like the kind of thing that like for me identifies it as like a Ploy track. I wondered if that was like a conscious thing, or if you could talk us through that.
Yeah, definitely. I think I just try and make intros a lot more interesting, is because when you DJ more and like you're playing tunes that like the intros are a little bit boring. A lot of us now, we're just going to cut them off and put a new cue point somewhere else. So you want to I'm trying to use that time a bit more efficiently in the track, and it's nice to create a lot of tension in a tune. That helps, and then you can just chuck it in the mix when you're DJing, and it's already adding something to the to everything else. Whereas, you know, if you're just starting with like 16 bars of a kick drum, it doesn't feel very interesting to me, to be honest. But which track did you mean? The first record.
5G Bass?
5G, yeah, that's actually a weird one, actually, that arrangement. That's a bit different. I guess he's trying to make the most of that time and then get into the crux of the music as efficiently as possible.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to talk about on regarding arrangement?
Keep it simple, I think, is the main thing. I spent a lot of time trying to try and make it a bit different or a bit weird. But on the whole, if you're making dance music that you want to play in a club and mix with other tracks, then keep it simple and then try and work within that kind of simple frame to make something a bit more interesting. You start to play with things too much and like the pacing's not quite right, and it doesn't really like hit the right moments. So I try and keep that element of it real simple and precise.
And when I talk about kind of the instant like recognizability of your tunes, is that something you're like consciously thinking of when you're working? Yeah,
definitely. That all comes back to like talking about layering up drums and things like that. Once you kind of find a bit of a rhythm with that and find a sound that you like, you can kind of try and build that into the sonic identity a little bit more. So I'm always thinking about that and trying to, every track by itself, every element of the track by itself, I want it to kind of stand out when you listen to it alone. So yeah, really be thinking about every element that you put in there. I think is the best way forward.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions on things we've spoken about so far? One at the front, one at the back.
Hello, testing. You mentioned you keep, your core elements of your track as the kind of the primary parts, and then you got your other bits and bobs that float around as atmospherics. Yeah. And you're sending them into the stereo, I assume, by that. Yeah. Have you got any specific ways that you do that? Do you experiment? Or have you got like a set go-to every time?
I've got, where is this little plug-in? If I can find it. This is really good. It's part of the. You get this monthly Plugin Alliance bundle thing. I can't remember, it's like a £10-15 a month or something. But this is really good. Field audio stage. Again, lots of good presets in there. But stereo enhancer, pushback. You can push back the size of your mix in there. So like a lot of ambient things like pads or even percussion. If I want to really push it back in the mix, I'll definitely run it through there. Or maybe have 2 channels of it as well and just pan it quite hard on either side. Big reverbs is really good for that, for pushing it back. But then you kind of want to be careful how often you're using this kind of spatial stuff, because it can be quite draining in your mix as well and can drain a lot of energy out of the tune. So you kind of, I would use that in like quite sparingly at different parts, and then maybe automate how far it's being pushed back into the stereo spread really. But yeah, I think you need dynamics in the track, and it can go a long way, basically, you know, and that is really good for that.
I've got another question.
Yeah.
You keep saying keep it simple, and I know that's simple, but could you just tell us how to keep it simple?
Yeah, it's I guess it's like having simple ideas but executing them really well is, I think, what makes the strongest dance music, especially like peak time club music. If you listen to any of it, it's not really too busy. It's not overcomplicated. There's not loads of things going on. It's like take the elements that are gonna make the strongest dance music and then refine them and try and do them really well. You can just have a drum track which can last for 6 minutes, and that can be a really great piece of dance music. But you know, you need to put a lot of time into thinking about how those drums work together. It's the same with if you're going to sample vocals. You got to try and find something that is going to like perk someone's ears up on the dance floor. Really, if I listen back to or think about the kind of music that got me into making dance music, the real stuff that really made you like go, "Oh, what was that?" You know, it stands out, and there has to be a way of doing that.
Can you name some names?
Yeah, I guess the time when I was properly clubbing and like really being inspired by dance music was like the post dubstep stuff. So like the early Swamp 81 stuff and things like that, where stuff just sounded weird and it sounded really fresh. What kind of tunes were going on back then? Like early Addison Groove stuff on Swamp, or like even the Mickey Pierce stuff back then was really kind of like, it sounded different. Yeah, obviously early Hessle, or you know, bits and pieces like that.
Great, thank you. I think there was just one more at the front here, and we'll take more questions right at the end.
My question was a bit more towards like the final stages of your track.
Yeah.
You probably don't get it as much if you're getting asked to make certain like tracks for labels, but if let's say you're sending demos out, in terms of like getting the mix like a level that's kind of like, do you go for like a well polished mix, or is it more important for you to kind of get an idea communicated in a track to the label or the person managing the label?
Yeah, I think in the early days when I was sending out a lot of music, I would send out music in all stages. Basically, you do get a bit overexcited at some stages when you first start making music, and like you think the idea is really good and it's ready to go, but you know, generally you just haven't had enough feedback, because it's rarely the case that it's out there. But however, if you're sending something to a label where they're kind of like quite respondent and knowledgeable, they'll be able to hear something in a demo that is of interest, I think, and as long as they're going to give you that feedback and take the time to do that, then I don't think it matters too much. But yeah, the mix down part as well, it's really not a problem to go and get someone else to do it, or like get some help with that until you're at a place where your mix downs are really good and you're confident in them. And also sometimes it's nice to just hand over something that you're kind of done with creatively, and these like little technical mix downs that don't need to be that creative, you can get some help, get someone to do it. It doesn't cost too much, and then it might make you a bit confident about sending out your ideas. But ultimately the ideas are the main thing. Yeah, and that's the thing you should put the most time into thinking about.
Sweet, cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you for your questions. We will get on to talk a little bit about mixing and mastering. Is there anything else in the track, any of the other stems that you'd like to break down?
I don't think so. I think most of it kind of speaks for itself. There's not loads that kind of make up this track. It's just it was more just illustrating how that starting point you can then build on it and develop it. Yeah.
So you've got all these components. How do you reach the point where you're like, okay, this is it, I'm finished?
That's a tough one. I mean, I spend a lot of time, and then I spend a lot of time just kind of like referring back to it and listening to it like over months, really. I don't think you kind of have to force yourself to be at a point where you think it's finished, because I'll listen back to stuff now, well, nearly everything that I've ever made, and I could, find like 100 different things that I would change about it now or improve it. But there does come a point, and feedback from other people is a good thing. If you trust their opinion, and it gets to a point where they haven't got any kind of like real crucial things that they would change about it, that, and if they're listening to it objectively and they haven't got anything else to add, that's a really good way. But you kind of just have to make that decision in your head. Working the machine and working the compressors, everything, I don't know how to operate them. But you're there the whole time, back and forth with what you want, how you want it to sound. But I mean, really, it definitely helps and it's great. But you can do the majority of that yourself 100%, and it will still sound good in the club. Yeah.
Cool. Before we move on to a couple more questions, I'd be intrigued to know what is next for Ploy. You said that you didn't necessarily feel super ready when you were writing your first album. Do you plan to write another one? Are you going to try and like move in this direction slightly more?
I'll definitely do another album at some point, but I think it will be more like of a natural, when I'm in a good flow of writing music, and then I can just keep writing and then kind of refine that back down to some kind of album. Definitely, I wouldn't do another, like a label approach you and say, can you write an album for us? I don't find that a very productive way of working, actually. And my process is actually really slow and kind of a bit laborious sometimes. So it doesn't lend itself to deadlines or things like that. But I would do another album for sure. I've just finished another record I'll do on my label, which will be out in the next couple of months, but that's a lot more. It's kind of moving a bit more straightforward. I'm starting to like recognize things in dance music that I would quite like to add, or like hear something, but it's not quite what I would want. So I'm just trying to write that kind of music, essentially. Which is a little bit straight down the line, but with a bit of like nuance, and that's what I'm going to do next.
Exciting stuff. Cool. If anyone's got any questions, raise your hands. We've got one here. Or maybe, we'll do a round of applause first. I think. Give it a
I was going to ask, do you find that the material picks the tempo, or do you pick the tempo and then fit the material to it when you're writing a track?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's both, actually. Yeah, especially if you're working with samples to start off with as like a jumping point. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of both. Yeah, it can happen both ways. If I can't make something work to like a certain speed that I want, then I'll keep it at naturally at where it's supposed to be. But on the whole, I feel like you can mold things and time stretch things into the right thing. Often like throws up more interesting results that way, actually. Like any kind of like early records that I did, they're a bit more like percussive and a bit like way more swung, like the early time dance stuff. That's because like I was just like re-stretching this stuff into new grooves, basically. So yeah, it's a bit of both.
Thank you.
It's definitely on the list.
Awesome. Is it you?
Hi. You're gonna hate me for this.
I recognise that voice. Yeah.
Is the new material ready for us to listen to? Can you give us a sneak peek?
Where are you? Oh, you're there. Yeah, can do that, Larry. What do you want to hear?
Thanks, sorry.
Just one of the tracks on this new record you're talking about.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, kind of just progresses like that, and there's a few more drums, and it's just like, trying to make things a bit more progressive, but keeping that groove and a bit slower. It's like 126 or something like that. But still trying to keep it relatively interesting, but stripped back, refined, yeah.
Sounding sick. You're DJing when you're not even on stage. You're pushing the buttons. Just right at the back. Yeah.
Hello. Have you got a synth or a VST or a piece of hardware when you're noodling out ideas and you're doing a bit of sound design and stuff like that? Is there something that you go to? Is it from a certain time period?
No, I don't use any hardware, and I don't have any synths at all. I kind of bounce around between a few like soft synths. The Alchemy synth in Logic, the new Logic is really good. And then like if I'm trying to make little melodies or something, I'll run it through an arpeggiator or like a chord creating thing, and then layer up things like that to kind of like generate a little melody or a synth sound. But the Arturia, the old kind of like the ones that replicate things like a Juno, were pretty good if you want those kind of sounds. But on the whole, not like one particular thing. Yeah.
So you're not picking like a soft synth for a certain kind of sound aesthetic. So, for example, like a lot of the modern stuff, Serum, or as you mentioned, like an old Juno or something like that. It's just kind of whatever works for you at the time.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But I do like that idea of doing that and like picking one specific thing. I think if you start to like put a bit of there's almost too much freedom in a piece of software like Logic or something. You've got too much to choose from. So it is a good thing to kind of refine what you're using. Maybe pick one synth and like write a whole EP based around that and some other ideas. I think that's a good idea, and I would do that. Yeah.
Any more questions? Yes. Yeah.
I can get by. I do this full time. It's like I make just enough kind of like get by and do that, which is good. And I can spend every day doing that. Motivation wise, yeah, there's periods where you have like little breaks and you kind of you don't really know what you want to make. But to be honest, because I'm predominantly making club music, I find that just like going out and like having good parties and going to good clubs and really like getting your kind of recharge from that is what I find most important if I'm then trying to make dance floor music at the moment. And then it's about where you are in your own life as well. If I was having like a real shit time or something, I probably wouldn't be that motivated to make any dance music or club music. But because, I haven't really fell into that, which is good, which is nice. I'm like it all feeds back into everything about, you and your life and where you are, I think. Doesn't necessarily like inform it sonically, but makes it a lot easier to get in the studio if you're happy and just having a nice time. Yeah.
I guess this kind of follows on that really good question is discipline.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard out there. How do you stay disciplined? How often do you spend time in the studio? Are you disciplined?
Yeah, I'm definitely disciplined. I try and do something to do with music every day, and then if you're DJing at the weekend, so it's almost like 7 days a week. If I don't really have a day where I'm not doing something that is in some way related to music, I feel a bit kind of weird if I'm doing that. Occasionally it does happen. You do take it's usually accidentally, to be honest. But I'm just quite disciplined in myself. And if I'm not doing this, kind of like makes me happy. So if I'm not doing this, and if I'm not trying to write some music, and you get a real buzz from it. If I'm not doing that, then I'm not really getting that from anywhere else, to be honest. So that kind of keeps you focused.
And I guess I'll ask, go on. Whilst I go over this to Leon, do you have like any tips for people who are starting out, like how to get in that workflow, how to create that discipline?
Yeah, tips. I think when I first started doing it, I just really, really wanted to like contribute to this. I kind of started going out and started getting into dance music properly, 17 or something, and then just really wanting to be a part of it. And that's all I really wanted to do. It's all I've ever done is like listen to music from when I was like 12 or 13 or something, and then had no other real interest, to be honest. So like, you just really hungry to kind of contribute something to this stuff that made me really happy when I went out or something and heard it. And so I don't know, I think you've really got to be like hungry for it. You really got to kind of want to contribute, I guess, in a way. But to stay motivated, I don't know, don't pay attention to what anybody else is doing. That's probably the worst thing now in modern day or whatever, is watching what everybody else is doing and constantly thinking about that. And if people are more successful or something like that, you just got to pay no interest in that really, and just have to enjoy it. If you're not enjoying what you're doing, then you're not going to make anything good, I don't think.
How are you keeping a sense of movement throughout your tracks?
Sense of movement throughout the tracks. Yeah, that's lots of little things along the way. you can make like little kind of risers that kind of you automate and shift, because really the body of the track isn't moving too much. So it's like referring back to this spatial stuff, you know, delaying stuff, pushing stuff back into the mix and then pulling it all back in together. You know, this combination of wet and dry throughout the whole thing. If you can utilize that really well, then you're gonna kind of like almost create this sense of movement, even if there isn't too much there. But yeah, push stuff back into space, and then like all the dry information, like your kick and your clap and your bass, like drop that down, and then have all this kind of delayed stuff and a pad, you know, push that out and then suck it all back in. If you think about it in those kind of terms, then it starts to give your tracks a lot of movement. It's just finding ways to do that. But you know, there's kind of simple techniques which you can do for that.
Keely.
I can hear you, yeah. That kind of works. For spatial stuff, I go back to sampling. There's some stuff like if you sample something that's like weird jazz ensembles or something where they're just like there's loads of space in it, and it's just like they're using pads and synths and like big crashes and rides. You can if you pluck something from that and resample it, stretch it out a bit, you know, it creates this like weird movement, and then put that at the end of like a 16 bar fill or something, put loads of reverb on it, some delay, you know, make it odd. If you pick up little things like I do that quite often, and then I'll layer that up with like a different bass tone that starts to rise or something, and like a reverse cymbal that kind of like adds that movement as well, and then cut that out, and then you're back into the dry stuff. But like, so you pick up little techniques like that. Reverb is one of the best ways, basically, of creating space. Put a big reverb. It's a lot quicker, it's a lot more efficient, and then you can do that throughout the track a lot easier. So it's kind of like a finishing touch, it can be at the end.
Would you be able to just show us?
Yeah. Right, so if you group up whatever bits you want to kind of like push back, sometimes it's nice to push everything out of the mix at this stage. Even your kick drum and your bass, you can kind of like achieve things that you couldn't get earlier on in the stage. So I'll group all of them, grab them, bus them to a new bus, and then so I've got the body of the tune there, all sent to this new bus. And then what we can do is, you can put any kind of big reverb on there. Even that is, that's fine for now. Again, you create this big spatial thing. And then that one. that really big. Maybe you don't want to put that bass in there, so you take that back out. And then a bit of automation on this.
How much do you use things like randomizers and presets and stuff?
Randomizers, not really ever actually, to be honest, because I kind of want to control the detail a lot more. So maybe it's like to generate some material. If you put something that's got like a randomizer on it, then it might throw up some interesting ideas. But not that often. But yeah, but this, like, it takes a lot of playing around to get something that's good. But in this stage, just now, we've grouped together. It's only 9 channels, whereas previously in the project that would have been maybe 20 or 25 channels. It would have taken you a lot longer. I mean, you can push it back like that a little bit, and then why has that gone like that? It takes like a little bit of tweaking, but that's the basic premise of it, essentially. Yeah.
Awesome. Any final questions? One here. Wow.
I was just going to say, so you've been producing for is it 8 years or so?
When I did college, I was 18. I'm 32.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, through that time, you've gone through a lot of stylistic progression.
Yeah.
Do you try and keep a sort of signature sound, or do you kind of hold back certain tracks that you've made that kind of sonically differentiate from what you make, or do you try and do multiple genres and kind of experiment with different sounds, or do you like to keep a signature in what you've done throughout?
Yeah, that's a good question. I try things out in the studio, but yeah, not much of it would then get released. Over the years, I've definitely tried to play around with different things, but yeah, on the whole, I would just, yeah, it's quite specific what I'd put out at the moment, unless I really worked on something, refined it, and then felt confident enough to do that, then I would. But you also, you don't want things to get a bit weird and confusing and a bit, get muddled up for people to think, it seems a lot easier to stay coherent, but it's definitely good to try and work on different things in the studio. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. I realised we didn't really talk about the forthcoming track. I was obviously so mesmerised by it that I didn't ask, but we can expect that on Deaf Test in the next month or so.
Yeah, next month that'll come out, end of February. There's it's a 5-tracker, and they're kind of a similar style to that. Yeah.
Exciting stuff. Well, Ploy, thank you so much. It's been amazing.
That's all right.
And thank you all for your questions. So yeah, this is the first. Well, it's the 4th instalment of Trad, but the first this year. There are 2 more. So yeah, make sure you get your tickets, and thank you all for coming along.